Hi, this is Daryl O'Donnell, Executive Director for Ayra. You're going to hear now from four of our members who presented at our March 25th, 2025 all-member update meeting. First off is Jacques von Benicke from Bhutan NDI. Next up, we have Ankur Banerjee from cheqd, followed by Mathieu Glod from Forsure Technology Solutions, and then Nick Lambert from Doc Labs will close us off. Enjoy. But we'd love to have Jacques, if you could present your story of what you're working on in Bhutan. So Jacques and Bhutan NDI it's the first government group to join Ayra. And he's going to share quite a story.
So actually, this is the deck that we generally use at conferences this year because we have to change it every couple of months. Like Daryl said, we do change it quite often. And we recently, in January, got to the point where all of the online government services only use our NDI wallet. There's no user ID password anymore. And we've started to change that into some of the DHI companies, and some of the banks are now adopting it as well. I'll talk a little bit more about eKYC when we get to the screen. So I have 15 minutes and I have 12 slides, so I'm going to push a little bit, but please ask any questions as we go. So just a little bit of history. We actually started the project in 2021 with a directive from His Majesty. We met him and had an audience with him, and we explained the different models of identity. And when we explained decentralized identity and self-sovereign principles, he went, "That's the one I want. So let's do it on blockchain and let's make sure everybody has access to all of their data." And so that was the directive that we got. And then he basically told GovTech to fund the project. GovTech said, "We don't have money." And then the Indian government said, "Hey, we'll give you some of the money through the Digital Transformation Fund." So India provides around 5 billion US a year to Bhutan for transformation projects and other like hydroelectricity projects and stuff. So we've been using that digital transformation money to actually build the NDI. So it's completely funded in-house. By February 2023, we made His Majesty the Royal Prince. He was 7 years old. We actually got him on stage to do an onboarding using his iPad to show to the people that, he's the first digital citizen. It was his dad's birthday, but that it's easy enough that a 7-year-old can do it. And he did it as part of the conference. Then in July 23, the Bhutan NDI Act was enacted and signed by His Majesty and became law. And it's a purposefully written piece of legislation, which is openly available on our website, that basically just creates the governance and the rules around digital identity and how we manage it. It also created a brand new regulator that oversees it. And the sort of tagline was, "By Bhutanese, for Bhutanese, always free to all Bhutanese." So any of the costs for writing stuff to the blockchain, like the gas fees and things like that, a user never actually pays for it. Even services like the backup and recovery function that we built, which also uses AWS infrastructure, is always free to a person who's using the wallet. Then in October 2023, we actually launched the system and people could onboard and actually start using the application. We used a use case where we said, if I wanted to apply for a job in Bhutan, what are all the things I need to be able to do? So to be able to apply for a job, you needed to have security clearance and audit clearance, which comes from the government. You have to have a bank account. So we wanted to make sure you could open a bank account. And then you had to have some kind of reference. So we wanted you to be able to upload some kind of a document that you held as a reference. And so those were the first use cases that we launched with. So if we now start getting in a little bit more of the detail, those are all the things I just spoke about. In July 24, we were on the Verity platform originally with Sovereign blockchain, and then we changed from Sovereign to Indicio blockchain because we felt Sovereign was too slow. And then in 2024, Verity stopped changing their code base. So we switched to a new platform called Credible, which also has several digital public goods certifications for, in fact, at the moment. And it's also now got other certifications, and it joins the Trust Network and other things. And then we weren't happy with the performance of Indicio, so we switched it to Polygon. And about 3 months ago, we're not happy with the decentralization of Polygon, because the Polygon blockchain actually is mostly more than 90% of all the nodes sit in India. And also the development community almost all sit in India. So we're at the moment switching to pure Ethereum for the what we call backend stuff, so the schemas and things that we write, and then we're going to pick a new layer 2 blockchain that will be more performant and more distributed. And then October last year, actually in May last year, Papua New Guinea came to us and said, hey, we have this funding from Australia to create a digital identity, and if we don't have something when we are supposed to launch in September, then we're going to lose all this funding. So the conversation started in May 24 and it went live in October 2024 by literally redeploying the whole Bhutan NDI, but connecting it to their data sources and adding their different workflows. There are other countries that we are talking to at the moment. Georgia just released an RFP, and we submitted the RFP last week. And when you read the Georgia RFP for decentralized identity, it reads like our publications for Bhutan. So they're asking for almost all of the use cases and stuff. And so some of the members, like I saw in the group that are bidding. So we're friends here, but we're also competitors. So that's going to be interesting. So I'm frozen, all my machines frozen. So what were the big goals? Facilitate digital inclusion. We had lots of people that had no bank accounts. We had lots of people who didn't understand the benefits of being in the digital ecosystem. We wanted to be very seamless for people so that they can be part of the service, but it becomes ubiquitous. And we wanted to make sure that there's good transparency and trust. So the trust registry is openly available. We do a lot of education and promotion of the platform. So we actually trained a lot of our Gelsong volunteers to go house to house to actually help the people on board, and then to also teach them how to use it, what the benefits are, and how to also be secure about their credentials. And the whole idea about all of these things was to promote economic growth. So the more we got people into the digital world, the more people get banked, and the more people get banked, the more they can actually buy things online and participate in e-commerce. They could also pay for their farming licenses, those things, without having to travel for extensive amounts of time. So generally, if you're in the East, a farmer, you have to pay around a $2 license each year. And it would take you sometimes half a day to a day traveling by foot or by horse to get to a place where you could actually pay your license. So we wanted to get that out of the ecosystem. Guiding principles, the one in the center is the most important: security and privacy above everything else, which aligns with everything that the Sovereign Foundation did around the self-sovereign principles. User-centric by design. The person being the holder is always the most important, and it should be an experience that is so seamless that it becomes ubiquitous. And then collaboration and partnership. So this identity, although funded by government money, was never intended to just be a government identity. So we have many use cases where we actually integrate with private companies and private services, which I'll show you in a second. So like I mentioned, we have the Bhutan NDI Act that was actually sort of guided and mostly written by Drummond. Most of you here probably know Drummond. So Drummond has been working with us for quite some time. He and Andy, that actually both worked for Verity in the beginning. Andy helped us more on the technical side, and Drummond helped us more on the legal side. But we built the policies. We even put penal clauses in there. So if you're a bad actor in the ecosystem, you could actually go to jail. It's that strict. We have a digital governance framework, which is governed by the new regulator, obviously, which is derived from the law that we have. And we're at the stage now where the governance framework is being broken up into policies, and then we'll codify those policies into the actual code base. Most of the key ones are already in the code base. And then data protection compliance. So in the Act, we actually wrote a section that says we need to make sure that this wallet is accepted across our border and that we could accept identities from outside Bhutan. And therefore, there's a whole set of standards that we should adhere to. So there's some things like GDPR in there. There's stuff around cybersecurity. There's ethical use of AI, 42,001. So there's a whole bunch of standards that we have to uphold to make sure that this product is also recognized outside. So accepting the terms of digital access, we have a lot of people in Bhutan that didn't have a smartphone when we started this in 2021. We also had people, or have people still, who farm in very high altitudes where obviously we have no cell phone or internet coverage, or used to not have coverage. So we built a couple of different things. So we used KaiOS, which is both a phone and an operating system. They have devices that can run Facebook, WhatsApp, our wallet, and various other things. And the device to buy outright is about somewhere between $30 to $50 depending on which version you buy. We also have what we call a super dense QR code version that's on a card, because there's loads of these farmers who farm cordyceps and yaks in the mountains that don't want to carry digital devices with them, so they carry a card. Now that we have Starlink launched in the country, we actually have a mobile verifier, and we have a model where we really have a Starlink device in a backpack and a human and a donkey with some laptops, going to very remote villages, trying to make sure that these people at least once a month have access to the services. We do use cloud storage. We have a web wallet that we are going to launch within the next couple of weeks. It's in final testing stages at the moment for the people who prefer to use the digital identity cards. It's very highly encrypted. It can only be accessed by their biometrics. So there's very, very much strict rules around how to get access to it, because we are very strict that NDI can't actually store any data in our platform. So when we have a service like the cloud storage service for backup and recovery, or the web wallet, we have to make sure that it's only accessible by the holder using biometrics. Then I mentioned a little bit about promotion, social inclusion before. So we do run awareness campaigns. We run what we call educational programs, where I say we send people to each individual house and we train the people on how to use the smartphone, how to onboard, how to use it to sign into government services. We have inclusion initiatives where we spend time with the parents and the kids. So a lot of the parents are illiterate. So we teach them to understand how to get their kids to help them drive the wallet at the moment. We started developing what we call a controller wallet, and some other mechanisms where you could legally be a guardian of somebody, and your wallet can drive their wallet, not like getting access into their real wallet, but it's a quite complicated problem to solve at the moment. But that's the last part in the inclusion initiatives that we still have to solve. I talked a little bit about the education. It's about not just the device, but also what is e-commerce, how to be part of the digital community. We talk a lot about the benefits of using it. So when they have to pay their licenses, when they get asked for their driver's license, if they get stopped by the police with using the mobile verifier, there's lots of things like that. And we have multiple support channels. So we do have an AI-trained chatbot that's pretty good at helping people, and it's taking almost 80% of the service calls now. We used to have a human manned calls or service desk. And when we started, that was 12 people. At the moment, it's one person, and it's not dedicated because they don't get enough calls every day. So even the support calls and requests coming into the service desk are now almost all handled digitally. So these are some of the use cases, not all of them, but we try to just put on the screen all the big ones. So obviously the government services, like Darren mentioned, you can only access them through NDI. Some of them have what we call level 2 and level 3 integration. So Zest is the application which all the civil service people use, and it does authentication and authorization. So depending on your employment VC that's in your wallet, it will actually make sure that you get access to the right parts of the civil service portal. In education, we do things like provide you with a verified record of your academic achievements, or whether that's your high school achievement or your degrees. In healthcare, you can now, we have inside the wallet, we have your allergies, so that if a first responder gets to you, they can actually see your allergies. We're going to expand that to put in current medicines. We have an electronic patient information system, which now uses the wallet to connect your identity to your health record. And when you download the health app, it actually asks you to register with NDI. So it actually registers and creates your record into the EPA system, and then a physician can actually connect any of the records that's hanging around in the system that isn't connected to your NDI. We have a history of when you go see the doctor, you can either provide your old identity card or you can provide your phone number, and they used to write it on a piece of paper. So there are still records which are being digitized and put into the system. In telecommunications, we have 3 telecommunication companies. 2 of them have already been fully integrated. They can provide a verified phone number as a credential in your wallet for OTPs, even though now we have OTP in the app. So for financial transactions or high value transactions like pension payments, you can actually ask an OTP to be sent to the wallet, and as part of the OTP to ask additionally for a liveness test before you pay your pension, which is the use case that just went live. But the third telecommunication company is Starlink. We launched Starlink in January, and part of the reason we wanted Starlink is to get access to the more remote places, because it's very expensive for us to try and cut out fiber optic cables in the very mountainous area that we have. So Starlink is unique in that they have no services in the country or no humans in the country, but it does at least give us that satellite connection that we need when we go to remote communication on remote places. Banking, we have 7 banks. The central bank last week sent out a circular to all the banks that they must adopt our eKYC and that they must once a year update their customer databases with eKYC from our wallet to standardize the data in the banks and to make sure that it's always current. So from a banking perspective, all the banks are now also integrated with NDI. You can do things like open your bank app, you can register for or apply for loans, you can apply for a new account. We have digital signatures in the platform as well, so you can digitally sign for your bank, your new bank card and stuff without ever having to actually go into a physical bank building. Gelsong is kind of like conscription. 3 months you get army training, and then the next 9 months, because it's a mandatory 1 year after you finish school, you get to choose to go either to technology school or handcrafts type school where you learn skills like mechanics, but making knives, things like that, or IT school. There are cybersecurity courses and things like that. But the Gelsong app is integrated with the Ministry of Education, so it actually sends out notifications to the people when it's time for them to get ready to go to Gelsong training. So when you're 15 years old, you actually get a message from your education provider, so your school, wherever you are, that you have to register for NDI and download the NDI app. And while you do that, then you automatically also register for Gelsong so that the Gelsong can then push out the notification to your wallet at the right time. Employment, the 2 biggest groups like DHI and Tashi Group have employment VCs. The civil service have employment VCs, and some of the insurance companies and other companies have VCs. And it basically just says, hey, I'm Jacques. It's kind of modeled on the Glyph VLEI VC. So I'm Jacques. This is what I can do. I've been working here for so long. This is my salary. This is my rank. And if it's also used for authorization for access, then it also carries a couple of other fields around what is unique to that particular system that you have to authenticate or get authorization to. Privacy and security. So we support both W3C and AnonCred. All the algorithms that we use in the platform are now all NIST post-quantum compliant. So they Crystal Kyber and Crystal Selenium. We do support old ones like the BS group, but we generally are trying to switch to more newer security models. In fact, talking about security, this week we signed a contract with an ethical hacking company and a pen testing company. So over the next 4 months, they're going to actively attack the platform using ethical hackers to see how robust our security is. So in the future roadmap, cross-border integrations, and here I'm going to mention one of the travel use cases that we are working with in India. In the airports, they have a fast lane called DigiYatra, where you can use biometrics for your onboarding pass and boarding the plane. It's used in all of their domestic airports, and we're running a similar service out into Bhutan. And the idea is because we don't really have a traditional border between Bhutan and India, we'd be able to use our own wallets, but with a digital boarding pass as a token and biometrics, and therefore board planes in either India using a Bhutan NDI wallet, or board a Bhutan plane in Bhutan using a DigiYatra Indian wallet. Then digital payments and stable coins. So the Gala for Mindfulness City, which has been in the news, which is a new SAR that we're building in Bhutan, is going to not have fiat currency. It's only going to use stable coins called TER, which are gold-backed. So we're currently building payment rails and things into the Bhutan NDI wallet to be able to trade in both fiat currency and tokens, because of course there is still fiat currency and it will take some years to transition from fiat currency to pure tokens. But we're building that in, and we're hoping to launch that before the end of the year. And then there is deep integration that we want. A lot of the government to citizen services, for instance, if you want a passport at the moment, is what we call level 2. So you would go to the security clearance website, get a security clearance VC, you'll go to audit clearance, do an audit clearance, and then you'll go to passport and provide these services to passport. But passport would actually ask you for these things individually. So in the next release, what we call a level 3 integration is we're going to actually create complex VCs. So as a user, I would go to apply for passport. I'd get one proof request, and my wallet will actually supply all the information that I need. And then the passport agency would not need to go and verify each of these other things independently, because with these VCs that we already have, they still required PDF version documents of things like your birth certificate and those things, which this year will change to being fully digital. Same with driver's license. Digital signature, electronic signature. So we distinguish between the two. If we're cryptographically signing a PDF like a contract or something else that you would later use to prove something and prove that it wasn't tampered with, we use what we call a digital signature. If you have to sign something like in the picture with what we call a wet signature, or multiple people want to sign a contract with a wet signature, we use e-signature capability, and that's in the wallet at the moment as well. So we're rolling out to the government this month. So they will switch all of their internal memos, which are currently paper-based, to paperless. And then here's a whole bunch of additional resources. We do publish on our dashboard, which is on the website, exactly how much money we're spending on AWS, how much money we're spending on developing it. There's access to a lot of the videos that we create. So we do create, every time we add a new service, we create a short video, trying to keep the videos in less than a minute for people to actually see how to use a new service. There are also other videos of where we speak on particular podcasts and things like that. And there are also code snippets and stuff. So we are actually getting companies from outside of Bhutan using our code snippets and integrating and testing with our test environment, and then coming back to us and asking us questions about the platform. So countries like Sierra Leone and Brunei are also talking to us because they're quite interested in the platform. In Papua New Guinea, we've been asked to help them build a voters' roll record, and this is one of the use cases that we are working on at the moment. We have a by-election coming up in one of the big cities in Bhutan in June, and we actually want to do remote voting using the NDI product. So at the moment, we're building all kinds of things in there to make sure that we can overcome duress voting, that we can do all kinds of other things so people don't have to relocate to vote. So in Bhutan, we have what we call a permanent address, which is kind of where you were born, and that's where you have to vote for the rest of your life. Doesn't matter where you move to. And so we have, because we've had urbanization happen over the last decade, a lot of people are working in cities like Benicke, Thimphu, and Paro, but they used to live in villages spread all over Bhutan. So if they have to vote, they have to go back to these villages. And the custom means if you go back to your village, you have to take lots of food and presents, and then when you're there, so it costs you money to get to your village, and it costs you money for the food and the presents you have to give to everybody. And then they bring you food and presents, and you have to give them money for giving you food and presents. So it becomes very expensive. So a lot of people don't want to go home and vote. And so we're trying to overcome this problem by creating a digital vote. So you can vote from anywhere, and it will also allow us to have all of the diaspora spread over the world be able to partake in votes without using postal votes, which are very corruptible. We have about over 60, almost 70,000 people in Australia. And if you think in a population of 700,000, if nearly 10% of your population is diaspora in a country, it's a big part of the vote that could potentially make a difference. So that's why we want to do the voting one. I think that's it for me. I'll hand back to...
A couple quick questions, Jacques.
Yeah.
One of the things that in some ways surprises, but we've learned it made a ton of sense to us. But when we briefed you about GAN at the time, Ayra now,
Yeah.
and then you reached out to Drummond and I very much, I think, the next day and said, you guys are in. Can you give a short explanation on why it is that Ayra is important to what the work you're doing is? You're accomplishing an amazing amount.
Yeah, look, so for us, we knew as a small nation, we have this general mindset anyway that we never build something for local. We always solve local problems, but we think global. So we always want to be able to monetize that or grow that outside of the country. And it was exactly the same with the digital identity platform. But we also knew that adoption will be slow unless other people can do it, maybe not as easily as we have, because we have super support from the government and from His Majesty. But if we don't start connecting it across border, then it's not going to really be valuable. And if you think about payments, I can use my Visa card in any country. I can use my MasterCard in any country and payments. I can go on, on Amazon and order stuff from the US or from Singapore, and it gets delivered in Bhutan. So for me, I travel quite a lot for work and for other things. And my passport is that piece of paper document that gets me to go across borders and do whatever I need to do in those countries reasonably seamlessly. And we thought, well, if one of the credentials we are carrying in the wallet is a passport, and the purpose of that is to make it easier for me to travel and become a global citizen, then the platform in itself has to be, as ubiquitous as a MasterCard or a passport. And so when you discussed GAN originally, it was like, this is the identity version of a MasterCard or a Visa network or a passport, a paper passport. And if we can get credentials and wallets to be that ubiquitous, then we all win. So that's why GAN was so perfect for me.
Thank you. And then the second question I had was just for folks who, you can tell, I was commenting, and one, I'm glad I presented before you. You always do such a great job, Jacques, but when I presented the Ayra card loosely to you the other night when we were talking, I didn't do the whole presentation and stuff, but the feedback you gave of, you may have noticed your words of something that is simple but dynamic. Those are the words that we took, and I was surprised to hear that you thought the idea had some power. Any thoughts on that?
No, I still think that it's very important, because there are a lot of situations where we will have a human-to-human interaction. And a lot of times it's because maybe I'm paying you for a service, you're coming to pick up rubbish or deliver something or whatever that interaction is. Or you turn up at my door and you say, hey, I'm here to service your gas. And I'm like, I'm not expecting you. And do I really know who you are? And is there a very easy, very fast, simple way for you to just say, hey, I'm Jacques and I'm here to do this, and here's my work order, without us having to actually look at paperwork and for me to try and understand your technical paperwork. So anything that would make that human-to-human interaction for us to trust one another, you are who you say you are, and you couldn't be where you are. I think that's a path we want to go down and make it simpler. So when you explained it in very short terms that day, I had all these sort of ideas, and I thought, yeah, there's a good match for that. Awesome. And so that's why I'm quite excited about the ID.
Terrific. Anybody else have any questions for Jacques?
Yeah, Jacques, I had a
I ask,
question. Sorry, Robin, you first, then I'll go.
when I visited during the Bhutan Innovation Forum last year, the NDI team had implemented roughly 20 different use cases for citizen to government interaction. Had like another 100 on the list. What number are you up to at this point?
So for context, for us, a use case is a contained function. So passport is a use case, driver's license is a use case. So we're on 37 at the moment.
That's the number I can use, up to 37.
Yeah, look, we're still very reliant on partners and third-party partners. So as an example, when I want to integrate with, say, the Bhutan National Bank, we provide them everything, we provide the guidance, but they have a third party or sometimes multiple third parties so they would have maybe one party develop their website, one party doing the daily app. And then what we end up with is we actually get slowed down by them because we then have to teach them, explain to them. They then go away to wherever they are, India or Bangladesh or Sri Lanka, and they work on their thing and come back. We don't actually develop all these integrations. So all of the IT companies, all 16 of them in Bhutan, have all been taught, and all of them either work with government or work with some of the private companies engaged in developing new features. So if we had more companies, we would go faster. Because we still feel we're not going fast enough. But that's our constraint. So our speed is limited by the third-party developers actually being taught how to integrate. And then what happens is actually a very interesting thing. We go to them and we say, hey, this is Bhutan NDI. This is what we've done. Here's something we've done in your industry with somebody else. And then they do that first 1, 2, maybe 3 registrations and single sign-on and those sort of things. And then they come back to us and say, actually, we have thought about this use case. Can we build this use case? And then they would build an additional feature in. We still count it as one use case, though. It still remains one use case because it's one company. But they come to us and then they say, oh, we have this idea, we have that idea. And then, of course, we go to the other banks and we say to the other banks, you know what's a great idea? And so we end up, the adoption is kind of snowballing because it's now starting to be driven by the companies who are implementing it, as opposed to us having to have all the ideas.
Beautiful. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Roman.
Yeah. I had a question kind of, I guess, in a sense related to the answer that you just gave, Jacques. It seems that Bhutan didn't have concern with technical debt or legacy infrastructure. Or was there a challenge with that? And I think in the context of, I guess, the private sector or other markets, are there any learnings that you can share in terms of how to maybe overcome challenges around existing behavioral patterns or so on?
We do have a legacy identity system, which is card-based. It's called the Citizens ID card. And it's literally a card that is normally actually handwritten with your number at birth. And it's given to your parents, and then over time, every 10 years, it's updated with your details until you get to 18. And then after 18, you get issued your permanent CID number. So your number might change over time. But that number is still valid. And in the government, there's 850 different services that they provide. And all 850 of them are connected to that legacy system. For the ones which are online and are now online service, there's about 130 of them. They all use the Bhutan NDI. But internally, they haven't switched all their systems over to our system. So what we do is, in their legacy systems, we still share with them the old number and the new identity. So some of these systems over time will start pushing over and getting rid of the old identifier, but it'll take some years. So in this transition period, we still maintain the old number with the new one. And for the systems that need the old one, we still provide the old one. I think it would be very hard, especially in established ecosystems, to get rid of a very well-established, very well-functioning identity system. But it's finding a way for the two to coexist. So in Bhutan, the two coexist quite well. We still issue CID numbers to newborn babies because we don't have a mechanism yet for a newborn baby to do a biometric onboarding into the wallet. The parent can biometric onboard. So for babies up until they're 15 years old, when they have to or they can register for the Bhutan NDI, they basically still are maintained as the old traditional identity number. Once we crack this controller wallet, guardianship wallet mechanism, then the idea is we'll be able to issue at birth. And once we can achieve issuing at birth and finding a better mechanism, then we would probably start phasing out the old system. Because ultimately, maybe in somewhere like 5 to 10 years, we do want to be pure digital and get rid of the old-fashioned cards. But there is a transition, and we acknowledge that there will be a transition. And look, even when we go house to house, there are people who just say, you know what, I don't want your digital identity. So for those people, we'll continue the education. We'll continue trying to make sure that they shift on the education part and become more digitized. But for them, they can take their card, they can still come to the government office, and they can still be served by a human being. I don't think that anytime soon we'll be able to get that away. So what is unique about Bhutan is we only allowed television and internet in 1999. So the first people that grew up with technology are now only in their mid-20s. So we have a whole big part of the population that don't care about TV, don't care about mobile phones and those sort of things. So there'll be some time for those folks to either catch up or transition. And because this was always started from an inclusion perspective, we need to make sure that, you know, although we want you to be digital, if your choice is not to be digital, then there should be a mechanism for you to still be able to exercise that choice and get the service, you know, by being served by a human.
Got it. Got it. Thank you so much for that.
No worries.
Thank you very much, Jacques.
So what we wanted to sort of talk through, I think you can see my screen now. Just a quick introduction. If you haven't heard about us, we are a decentralized identity network that is focused on how some of the actual exchanges that happen in such networks could be paid for and monetized. Part of that also relates to the way trust registries work. But in this sort of presentation, I just wanted to quickly run through what we've been working on a mechanism to create something called decentralized trust chains as a form of establishing trust registries. So why is this a problem? Establishing some form of trust requires both governance and technology expertise, which is one of the reasons why it's hard to do. There's a lot of stuff that gets solved within the technology aspect of this, some that get solved on the governance aspect of this, but you kind of need both to try and solve that. And it's really what we sort of see it as is, if you think consider the technology stack, the governance stack, trust registries is the thing that binds both of those together. It is an expression of that governance into a format that allows the technology to understand it. So it's quite pivotal to answer the questions about who is trusted, what are they trusted for, and by whom are they trusted. But something that we keep on seeing at cheqd is quite often people tend to revert to using X509 certificates because it's comfortable, it's been there, it's been around for a while. And so we wanted to show a slightly different way in which that can be achieved. So why do people keep on going back to those X509 certificates? I think it's because there's not really an end-to-end picture in terms of specifications or standards in how trust registries are supposed to work. So there's some specifications that are there on trust registry construction, and there are some others that exist on trust registry reading or validation, but there's not a lot of combination of those two that has happened so far. And so the current sort of way it ends up is regulators end up having to make the choice of picking something that works. And although they might be interested in doing decentralized PKI or decentralized identity, it tends to fall back to X509 certificates. And so in a very sort of like, simple way, what we sort of like, allow you to create is to model the same kind of chain that you might have in a traditional X509 certificate chain, but to do that in a fully traversable and a fully decentralized fashion. It still allows you to answer the kinds of questions that trust registry query protocol type validation specifications talk about. But the way in which it is done is you think about this as a root trusted accreditation organization that can issue verifiable accreditations as verifiable credentials to any sort of issuing trusted issuers beneath it. This verifiable accreditation can also say, are they allowed to authorize others on their behalf? In the Ayra context, Ayra could be something like a root tau, as we call it in this diagram. Obviously, each ecosystem is probably going to create its own trust registry or trust list. So it's not necessarily taking any of that job away from the people who are building those ecosystems. But by issuing a verifiable accreditation to the individual ecosystems that are part of this, they can in turn go and authorize as many trusted issuers as they want within that ecosystem. And for simplicity's sake, this is only 3 levels deep. It can be as many levels deep as necessary. How does this sort of get tied back together from the credential that the holder has? So in the verifiable credential that the holder has, there's a property called terms of use that points to which root trust root tau has authorized this, and who is where has the trusted issuer gained their accreditation from. So this is obviously probably very hard to read, but some of these fields that go and capture is to capture what is it accredited for. So what are the types of schemas are they accredited for? Defining a terms of use that says this is the trust ecosystem they have been authorized by. And you don't need to record the whole steps. You just need to record the root and the very last intermediate step before all of this started. And you can also go and revoke that. So the same way that credentials can have revocation and suspension, the tau that is authorizing these trusted issuers can go and revoke that accreditation or suspend that accreditation. So we think that sort of allows people to go and model these complex systems in a way that is completely independent of the way that X509 certificates do it. Because as a trusted issuer, you can have verifiable accreditations that have been given from multiple sources. So you could have a verifiable accreditation that is from Ayra and from any of the ecosystems that are within Ayra. You can combine all of them, and that's where the sort of like power starts coming up. It's fully available if you want to go build it. There's some guidance that is there in our documentation on docs.cheqd.io. And we've also created some simple APIs. Since this can be quite complicated, you can go and use this in our sort of studio product or SaaS product as it's called. And there's a couple of working examples as well of modeling out multiple levels of these root trust accreditation organization down to how it sort of trickles down to a full verifiable credential. Final note to end this on, we are aware that, of course, in some contexts like EU digital wallets, you probably do need to use X509 certificates. So one of the open source products or the open source sort of projects that we worked on with Fraunhofer Institute is to combine the mechanism that they created using X509 certificates and DNS to be able to be tied together to these verifiable accreditations in a decentralized fashion that we've spoken about. And that ultimately allows a hybrid system. For example, as a recipient of some information, how could you perhaps follow a X509 certificate tree to see the trust ecosystem within EUDI, while also being able to understand a decentralized trust chain, as we describe it, into this. So that's it. I will end there.
That's awesome input, Ankur. I also that trust registry workshop we're looking at having towards the end of the month, end of April. I think it'll be key, especially with some of the learnings you've got on some of the naming conventions you've got for what are the terms of use. I think it's the term you're using.
Oh, that, by the way, has been, it is the same model that EBSI uses, so the European Blockchain Services Infrastructure.
Cool.
So it's modeled very closely to how the EU Digital Wallet Initiative works. So
Great.
the taxonomy and the terms that are used are all based on that, which hopefully, therefore, makes it a bit more reusable, and it's not just entirely, like, hallucinated up by ChatGPT.
Awesome. It wasn't vibe coded.
Wasn't vibe coded. This is entirely through a lot of lawyers.
Yeah. And it was just a point when we were at DICE in Zurich, the train group from Fraunhofer who works closely with cheqd, we were talking to them about how they fit into this overall as an integration layer. How do they fit into the story? So yeah. Anayan, who's up next?
So
Mathieu?
we have Matthew's up next.
All right, let me pop on here. Hi, everyone. Good to see a lot of familiar faces. Let me share my screen. I have a brief presentation, and just like Ankur, just with the time we have, I'll just try to be brief as I go through it. Okay, so I'm Mathieu Grode. For those who don't know me, I'm a co-founder and CEO of a company called For Sure Technology Solutions, which was a result of the recent merger of Northern Block and Spherion. So here's our leadership team. We've been in the space for over 7 years, participate in all sorts of different open standard bodies and open source communities, and we've done tons of open source contributions throughout those years in the space to advance the digital trust fabric. I'm here today to talk about a new white paper that we just released today, I think, or in the past couple of days at least, that I had the opportunity to co-write with Scott Perry, who is the CEO of the Digital Governance Institute, who is on this call here today. For Sure and the Digital Governance Institute have been partners for some time now, collaborating on making trust registries more operational than they are today. And one of the big missing pieces in a trust registry to bring integrity to the data that's actually sitting in there is strong governance backing and actually implementing processes on top of that governance that ensures the integrity of data that sits inside of the trust registry. So we've tried to collect all of our current thinking. Scott and ourselves are doing some very interesting deployments now in different areas of trust registries. And we hope that this white paper serves the industry well and that it helps move forward some thinking about trust registries and governance, and just also hopefully helps create more alignment in the space. And I know we're already very aligned with a lot of others in the space, whether it's the folks at Ayra and Trust Over IP, or whether it's the folks at cheqd. I think there's a lot of good people and good thinking that has gone behind this, and we're really trying to push the conversation forward now around the whole governance element that is really a key pillar that needs to be behind any implementation of trust registries. And so in this white paper, and so I could share the download link after. I had a QR code for those who wanted to capture it in the last slide, which I could come back to after, or I could just share the link directly in Zoom after I finish my presentation. we started the white paper off with a quote from Kim Cameron from his Laws of Identity white paper in 2005, which I think remains very, very relevant some 20 years later today, where the quote that we started the white paper is, "It's so hard to create an identity layer for the internet, mainly because there's little agreement on what it should be and how it should be run." So this lack of agreement arises because digital identity is related to context, and the internet, while being a single technical framework, is experienced through 1,000 kinds of content in at least as many different contexts, all of which flourish on top of that underlying framework. So when we're thinking about digital trust infrastructure, digital credentials, there's so many flavors of these things in various contexts, and as we all have come to realize, we need contextual governance infrastructure that is able to help publish different types of information that could be consumed to help with trust establishment. So that missing piece that, again, everyone here on the call, I don't have to go through this, is quite familiar with the model of data providers or issuers, holders, and verifiers. Really, that ecosystem governance piece that we're talking about really answers questions of who signed claims, were they authorized to sign claims, under what rules were they authorized to sign claims, and we introduced trust registries. So this is just, again, a brief summary of some of the elements that are in the white paper that I hope that folks who are interested will read and get value out of. We've been developing trust registries for a few years now. We're continuing to mature it. I think the work with the Digital Governance Institute is really maturing the governance components that we have in here. We gave a presentation recently of a trust registry that we put into place with the International Air Travel Association for airlines and air travel agencies, and this is being used in different use cases today. What we did in the white paper as well is we thought it was a useful exercise to contrast trust registries against other things that we may be familiar with, just to better understand what they are and what they are not. So we do it against verifiable credentials, which could be viewed as containers that hold claims. Trust registries are containers that hold claims. So what does one do and what does the other one not do? We have a whole section on that. We do the same with wallets and trust registries, and we do the same with X509 certificates, which Ankur just talked briefly about as well, just to understand where they are being used, where maybe they should not be used moving forward, and where trust registries provide opportunities to have a more scalable trust establishment infrastructure for different contexts on the internet today. We describe the different types of data that goes inside of trust registries. All this thinking has kind of been evolving over the past few years, and through our involvement in different communities like the Trust Over IP's Trust Registry Task Force, and thinking about how using a trust registry query protocol, we could query information, what type of information we want to query. Through our involvement in the development of open source libraries for OpenID Federation, we've been trying to align the thinking so that we could really have a common understanding across different types of implementations of trust establishment infrastructure or trust registries. And we did include a definition section at the start of the white paper, which we're trying to align with the Trust Over IP's glossary. We hope, again, some of the thoughts that we put in here will help further conversation, and we know that this will continue likely to be an iterative process, and we look forward to continuing to collaborate with folks on that. We have a lot of interesting content around how governance holds the whole thing together. So how governance really gives structure to trust, how it starts with risk assessments, how it defines acceptable behavior, how it defines who could be listed in trust registries, what types of statements could be made into trust registries, and going through the whole life cycle of this thing. And again, kudos to Scott, who has a wealth of knowledge on this stuff, really world class. And I think the combination of the governance work that has happened over the past few years with the evolution of trust registries is becoming quite powerful. Expanding on that diagram earlier, so one of the terms that I'm starting to use more, and I spoke about that at the International Air Travel Association conference a few weeks ago, is What ultimately we're trying to do in a digital trust ecosystem is create shared processes or be intentional about shared processes that could allow different participants, or if we just talk about a relying party, for example, to stop doing things in a fragmented way today, rely on a shared process at an ecosystem level, and be able to have enough confidence in that shared process to run their own business process, but based on some commonly established governance at the ecosystem level. So we describe how these shared processes are created, how ecosystem governing bodies are able to publish that into governance documentation, how trust registries serve as human readable places for governance documentation, and how that underpins information that goes into a trust registry, like entity statements, authority statements that I mentioned a couple slides ago, and how that could all be consumed in a machine readable format within the ecosystem and outside of the ecosystem, really, where trust registries are public places of high integrity authority information. We talk about key considerations for building and operating a trust registry. Again, here's the link. If any of this sounded interesting or any specific pieces sounded interesting, we're Scott and ourselves, Digital Governance Institute, and for sure we're quite interested in continuing to collaborate with more folks in the space to further the thinking and further the progress that we're making on trust registries today. So I hope this is a useful document for the community, and we're very open to any type of conversation or collaboration with anyone who may be interested. So I've sped through this. Before I close, just because Scott, I see you're here, did you have any comments or final words you wanted to add to what I just walked through?
No, the concepts around the governance side and how it relates to trust registries are very enmeshed, because you need to have a governance framework, a governance process to drive records on a trust registry. And the governance process that is articulated in this white paper has been derived from work that has been established at the Trust over IP for quite a long time. And it is tried and true. It is just something that now needs to get promoted more broadly to new audiences that are controlling their own ecosystems a lot more than currently exists. So it's the education process of doing something that's risk-based to reduce risk, not eliminate risk, and identify aspects for reliance outside of an ecosystem. And so the other thing is that I will be at IAW for anybody that wants to have a direct conversation with me about this. I'd love to discuss that. I hope to have Matthew available on a call for a session that I plan to do. It all depends on the room that I get, so I can plug Matthew in. So.
Wonderful.
Thank
So
you, Matthew
thank
and
you for the
Scott.
time, and thanks Daryl, Nayan, and Ayra for the chance to present this.
I think flowing from trust registries, we have Nick Lambert from DOC. And I think, Nick, you're going to be talking about privacy preserving credential monetization. Yes.
Thanks, everyone. Bit of a tough shift, I guess, kind of end of the meeting. Hopefully you're somewhat caffeinated, so maybe some of this will sink in. But thanks to everyone for the kind of opportunity for taking you through this pretty quickly. So Doc Labs are a relatively small company. Like Ayra, we're based out of Switzerland, a team of about 13, been working in the decentralized identity space since probably 2018, so quite a number of years. We do a lot of things that many companies within Ayra do. So we talked about kind of issuance, storage of credentials as well, in terms of different wallets, verifications. Connect is what's just been talked about in terms of ecosystems. And the part I'm going to focus on today is at the end here, the kind of monetization aspect. If there's anyone that's unsure, like monetizing credentials is hugely important. And really, I think it's overlooked in my view from many of EIDAS 2 and some of these other initiatives that are taking place, because without clear ways for businesses to operate and sustain themselves, the technology doesn't exist or won't exist and can't be maintained. So it's hugely important from that perspective. And I think it's a significant reason why decentralized identity, verifiable credentials, it's not the only one, but for me, it's really a key factor as to why this is not yet at mass adoption. I think many of us are surprised why we're not seeing a lot more of this technology out in the wild. There are different reasons, but I think not creating clear business models is certainly a significant factor here. In addition to that, the types of companies that we want to implement our technology are existing identity providers. They could be companies that are like Life, they could be companies that are doing ID and V checks, KYC, AML checks. Those very same companies, their business models get cannibalized by some of this new technology. They live on the fact that they can do continual verifications of individuals over and over again, using verifiable credentials as a form of reusable identity removes that. So they have got no incentives to start to integrate this new technology. And so this is a kind of major factor. Final point here is that with things like EIDAS-2, which is obviously the government regulation going on within the EU, some of these small entities will not have the resources, both technical capability and finances, to be able to do this. I think some of the smaller countries in Europe have got kind of, the total turnover of the countries is kind of $16 billion, very, very small. How are they going to pay for and sustain these types of infrastructures without some business models in place? So DOC has built credential monetization. It has been probably live for about 9 months now, and it's kind of going through pilots with about 5 or 6 partners at the moment, and I think we'll see these move into production and live in the very, very near future. Our considerations when designing this system was that we really needed to incentivize issuance. We can't have ecosystems that exist without the credentials themselves, and so that's a kind of key factor. People need to want to issue credentials. Monetizing wallets is something that you hear quite often. I can't see how that would work. I think you have to monetize ecosystems, and that was a consideration for us as well. I think also citizens will not pay for ID. So when we think about who are going to pay for these solutions, it's probably not going to be the end user. And there may be some notion that we each pay for a passport. We might give $100 to our government every 10 years or whatever it is. But day-to-day verifications of our ID, we're not used to paying for that. I don't think our attitude on that is going to change. And entities, in our view, that get the value should pay, and that is the verifier, or in kind of old money terms, the relying party. They're the one that is getting the use and the value from that verified data. We took the view that they should be the ones that pay. And the final point here is holder privacy must be maintained. So this is just to kind of give you an insight into what the kind of back end of our network. This is our Truvera workspace. You can see the kind of ecosystems are set up here, the different participants, and then you can set up basically the different roles. And this feeds into what Ankur and also Matthew were saying about kind of ecosystems. I'm sure there's some differences between maybe how these are architected, but the fundamental concepts are the same. We have clearly defined roles and who can do what inside of these networks. You notice the final thing that we've added here is also a verification fee here. So that's kind of set to 0, but obviously within our monetizable credentials, either ecosystem convener, the company running the ecosystem, or the issuers can help decide how much they want to charge for each credential. And those charges can be defined at the schema level. So you can have multiple schemas inside an ecosystem. You can decide a verification price for each of those. So just kind of capping off at the end here, just hopefully that's not run too long in time. The way that we've gone about this is the credential can only be verified by a member of the ecosystem that's authorized. So this is a closed garden walled environment ecosystem. The aspiration would be that in time you get to open ecosystems, which of course is something that hopefully Ayra will be helping with as well. But we built this to really start, run before we can walk, and build something that was easier to build than the concept and the notion of open ecosystems. And so all participants in that environment, they must be approved by the governors or the owners of those ecosystems. And what we do enable is the verification of monetizable credentials can be tracked, so that the invoice of the issuers can be paid. And I'll go into a little bit in a second as to how we protect holder privacy. We do not get involved in the payment rails at all. That's something that is done entirely by the existing parties that already have a relationship. So what we're doing here within these ecosystems are connecting together companies that already work together. We're just making those interactions much more efficient and standardized, and managed by the system. And as I mentioned at the end, the data and metadata of credentials is not tracked. This is an example of the billing report, which is the output of what we provide. And as you'll notice here, there's no holder data at all. So that's entirely hidden back. What is published in this report so that the issuer and the verifier can get some correlation between the work and agree that this was actually credentials that were used and verified. They get information like the schema, the verification ID, the issuer did, and things like that, and who the verifier was, and the price. So we don't really get into any information revealing the holder. We use kind of KVAC cryptography, which is a form of anonymous credentials, to help prevent that information being passed along. So hopefully that was a super whistle stop version of it. I hope it somehow made sense, and thanks again for the opportunity to present.
Thanks so much.
Yes, thanks, Nick. Your point on the verifiers, being the logical payer. I mean, I'm sure there were other models, but I agree that it is the verifiers, which the verification is the point at which value is being created, right? I'm happy to see that you have one of the longer term things we have on our roadmap is privacy preserving payments, so that we don't create a payment system that ends up exposing that I am the one using my particular credential to do something that is none of anybody else's business, type of thing.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, everybody. So we've had a story from cheqd on a couple fronts. One is where cheqd is being used as the source of truth for both a trust anchor, as someone from the Train Project called it, an approach to using credentials as the source to answer a trust registry query. You've heard from Mathieu, who's got a couple of things. One is operational trust registries, but also a paper on linking governance and how the governance and the technical pieces work together that he worked on with Scott Perry. And Nick, your story on that payments piece is absolutely critical, because it is the piece that's going to, unlock, to your point, Malta, Cyprus, they're country levels, but there's no way they can afford to run this, but value is being created. So how do they actually support those systems? That's fantastic.